All right. What's up, y'all? We were in the process of going live and something really weird happened. I wasn't sure what was going on. And then Alex, boss man, texted me and said his power all of a sudden flipped off. So I'll be rocking solo until further notice. But thanks everybody for tuning in. We are Biscuits and SEC.
We made it.
Looks like he is back. I don't know if we've got connection from him yet, but he's trying to pop back in here. But I'll go ahead and just intro the show in the meantime. So, yeah, we are Biscuits and SEC. This is Biscuits and SEC Live. Coming to you every Wednesday night through the off season at 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central. This is our 30th show, so appreciate y'all hopping on and joining us throughout the off season. It is May 7th. We had a good weekend of SEC baseball, Kentucky Derby, if y'all are into the horse racing. So good stuff. And I think, I don't know if Boss Man's here. Anyway, I'll just try to run this solo, and we'll bring Boss Man in whenever he can get back on. He's trying to hop onto the screen. But we got a good show tonight. We're going to touch on the Mississippi State baseball coaching search update. We will touch on SEC baseball itself after the big weekend. And then we got a couple of just sort of newsworthy items that we're going to hop into as well. There was a good AL.com article about SEC football program revenues and where everybody stands there. And then some news out of Gainesville as Todd Golden was extended, not surprisingly. We are brought to you by the Steer Agency, so appreciate those guys hopping on board and sponsoring. Football is all about strategy, just like winning in business. Whether you are dialing up the perfect play on Saturdays or looking to dominate in public affairs, PR, or digital marketing, you need a team that delivers results. That's where the Steer Agency comes in. They craft winning strategies to get you seen, heard, and ahead of the competition. Don't just play the game, control it. Visit thesteeragency.com and take your brand to the next level. Before we get into it, I also wanted to remind you all to please sign up for our newsletter. Boss Man sent it out earlier today. We deliver it every Wednesday during the off season, and then during the season, Mondays and Fridays. And if you like what we're doing here, you like the video, like hearing us talk SEC, please consider giving us a follow on social at Biscuits and SEC, and at like and subscribe to the channel. Give us a like on the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're trying to grow that. So without further ado, we will hop into this. Still getting word from Boss Man that he's having trouble getting in. Anyway, we'll hop into this solo for now. So Mississippi State, obviously, we talked about it quite a bit last week, at least kind of the initial rumblings. But, of course, to reset, in case anybody's been living under a rock, they fired their baseball coach, Lemonis, I guess after the weekend series last weekend. And they had a big midweek game that they rolled, and they actually swept Kentucky this past week after the firing of Chris Lemonis. So they're on the lookout for a new baseball coach. And we talk again, it's kind of what we said last week. Like, this is a big hire for Mississippi State as a program, in their athletic department, but also like this is a big hire in college baseball. They have got a great history in Starkville on the baseball diamond. In my opinion, they have the best environment in college baseball with Duty Noble Field. So very attractive job, and a lot of people are going to be in the running. The latest report that we were seeing I believe it came from On3, which speaking of On3, I don't know if y'all saw this past week, they I believe they bought Rivals, if I'm not mistaken, which is kind of crazy because the guy who started I believe it's 247. Anyway, the guy who started On3 has been in this industry for a long time, Shannon Terry, and has been uber successful. And he just bought, I think, Rivals with On3, which only started a couple of years ago. So anyway, they do a good job, report good stuff. And they are saying that the coaching search has kind of been narrowed down to 4 names. One that we really hit on last week in Nick Mingione out of Kentucky, who's doing a great job up in Lexington, had Kentucky in Omaha. I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, but has done a real good job up there and will, I assume continue to do a good job. I have read there's some questions with him around the contract at Kentucky because I think he's locked in there for a while. So not that he wouldn't go to Mississippi State or he couldn't, but there would be a fairly hefty buyout that State would have to pay, at least by baseball coach standards. But I still think he's probably number one based on what he's done at Kentucky. He's in the SEC and he's a former assistant at Mississippi State, so he knows Starkville, knows what it takes to win there, and would probably just be a good fit. But the other 3 names I thought were really interesting that this On3 report brought up, because we did not mention them at all last week. I think outside of the Georgia coach, which we did mention because Wes Johnson, the Georgia coach, was in some of that early reporting. Mississippi State fans and or Georgia fans that are watching this, please comment below and let me know if I'm off here. I struggle to see why a guy like that would leave Georgia for Mississippi State. I understand Mississippi State has a better history and has done more on the baseball field than has Georgia, but projecting forward, I mean, Georgia's got a ton of money. If they're serious about baseball, like, they could have a good contender. I mean, the amount of kids that come out of the Atlanta area and just Georgia in general and go on to play college baseball is plenty, right? There's plenty of kids in state. So to me, Georgia seems like a great job, a great place to coach baseball and to win baseball games. And Wes Johnson's been doing that there. So I don't know really what the attraction would be, again, other than history, but please chime in if I'm wrong on that. Maybe Georgia doesn't commit as much resources as Mississippi State does to baseball. That's probably been the case historically, but feels like moving forward, Georgia seems like they're serious about it and they've got the money to invest in it if they want to. So we talked a little about Wes Johnson last week. So I'm going to focus on the other 3 names that they singled out in this that I found interesting. So first one was Brian O'Connor from UVA, who I'm super familiar with. I spent a lot of time growing up and then even in the last couple of years, actually, in Charlottesville. And you're going to be hard-pressed to find a better coach in the country. O'Connor, pound for pound, might be the best coach based on, geographically where UVA sits, not in a baseball hotbed, and money resource wise. What he has done there is truly, truly spectacular. Of course, he's the winningest coach in UVA history. He's been to 7 College World Series and he's got 1 national title. So absolute home run hire if Mississippi State can pull it off. I struggle to see him taking that job because he has been asked to, or at least inquire about a lot of jobs in the past, and he's always turned them down in favor of staying at Virginia. So do I think Mississippi State's a better job on paper? Yeah, I do. Do I think he's actually going to make that move? No, I don't. So that seems like a pipe dream to me, but we'll see if there's any truth to that, because I guess eventually, maybe looking forward, he thinks that, the last 10 years of his career, he's got a better chance to win at Mississippi State. So I don't know. That seems like a long shot, but we'll see on that one. The other two that I think are much more likely from the sense of these guys would take it if offered. First one is Dan Fitzgerald, head coach at Kansas at the moment. So he's in his third year in Lawrence. They got a real good team this year. They're 37-13. They've been ranked most of the season. I think they just fell out, but they're up near the top of the Big 12 standings, if not still in first place. Seem to have a really good team this year. And this is his first head coaching stop. So again, this is kind of why I think he would take it, because objectively Mississippi State is a much better job than Kansas. And he's only ever been an assistant until Kansas hired him. He was assistant at Dallas Baptist for quite a long time during their most successful run. You know, those of us who follow college baseball know that Dallas Baptist has been to Omaha and Supers for the last decade or so. Definitely been in the mix. They got a great program there. He was the recruiting coordinator and assistant head coach there from 2013 to 2021. And he was assistant at LSU 2022 for a year, and then he got hired by Kansas. So great track record as an assistant, good track record thus far as a head coach. If Mississippi State were to offer him, I think it would be a good hire, and I think he would take it given his trajectory of, assistant, working his way up, getting a head job, and Mississippi State's a much better program than Kansas. We also do have a graphic here a little bit as well to kind of go over these. So the last one too that I haven't mentioned. So we went over Brian O'Connor, went over Wes Johnson, and touched on Dan Fitzgerald. The last one's Tom Walter from Wake Forest. So he's the winningest coach in Wake Forest history. He's been there for 15 seasons, and he's got one College World Series appearance in Omaha. So similar to Brian O'Connor, he's kind of the man when it comes to Wake Forest baseball, as O'Connor is when it comes to UVA. A lot less success at Wake than O'Connor has had at UVA, but Bossman and I were talking, pre-show. Wake Forest, I doubt we have any Demon Deacon fans watching the show, but if we do, feel free to flame me. But that athletic department is just fighting an uphill battle. That's a really tiny private school. I think they have like 4,000 or 5,000 undergrads, so they just don't have a ton of resources. And that is a guy to me who has probably topped out with what he's been able to do. So again, that seems to me like a guy that would be very much open to leaving if given that opportunity. And again, I think from Mississippi State's perspective, would be a good hire, because he's done a lot of good things at Wake Forest. He's been there a long time, so he's steady, and seems like a guy that given an opportunity at a bigger school with more resources in although the ACC is great at baseball, in a what I would say is a better conference, he's probably going to jump at that opportunity. And also, again, you talk about just why somebody would take a job. Like, I don't watch Wake Forest baseball, but it's such a small school. I can't imagine they're drawing a ton of people to their baseball games, and Duty Noble Field speaks for itself. It's again, in my opinion, the best environment in college baseball, and the opportunity to coach there in front of 10 to 15,000 fans on a good weekend series, as opposed to whatever Wake Forest is drawing, is probably an attractive offer. So that's kind of where we stand there. I think, again, Mingione seems to be the front runner. Brian O'Connor seems to be the long shot. Got to make the call, but unlikely he's going to take it. And, Tom Walter, Dan Fitzgerald are probably would take it if given the opportunity, depending on how things shake out with guys potentially, higher on Mississippi State's board than them. So All right, we're still trying to get Boss Man back in here.
Yes.
Looks like he might be trying to join.
No.
I don't know. I'm getting a black loading screen, so I'll just continue to plow ahead here. We can talk SEC baseball from this past weekend. So, for those keeping score at home, we got 2 weekend series left to close out the regular season. Texas is still atop the SEC standings, despite the sweep they suffered last weekend in Fayetteville. So it's unlikely, I would say, that Arkansas catches them, given I think Texas has a 2-game lead on them right now. But 2-game lead, but you never know, because Texas really got their first taste of a big time road environment in SEC baseball this past weekend. They've had a few, road series earlier on in the year, but none as big as playing a top 5 team or whatever Arkansas was ranked at the time, but a top 5 caliber team on the road in a big time hostile environment. And Texas kind of looked shell shocked. They got swept and it was never even close. They lost 9-0 game 1, 6-1 game 2, and then 13-8 in game 3. So they really didn't put up much of a fight. But again, they still hold a two-game lead in the SEC standings over Arkansas. So let's see. Yeah, we got our results here. So we can kind of just go down the line. As I said, Texas got swept in Fayetteville. Auburn surprisingly took 2 out of 3 from the Vols in Knoxville. Auburn's been playing some really good baseball this year, and something's going on in Knoxville. Tennessee has lost 4 out of their last 5 SEC series. So going back to that A&M series 5 weeks ago, they have since lost, 4 SEC series since then. So they're kind of on a bit of a skid here as of late, which is odd given, how well they started the year and how good of a program we know Vitello and Tennessee have there, of course, defending national champs. So moving down the line, Georgia swept Missouri. Not much to say on that one other than Missouri remains winless in SEC play, which is sad, frankly, for them. So Kentucky got swept by Mississippi State. So again, Mississippi State fires their coach and is on a 4-game win streak since then. I guess, one thing that I doubt this will happen. I don't have much, background on the interim coach that the Bulldogs are running out there, but I guess it's possible he could coach his way in, because State is projected to get into the NCAA tournament, into the postseason. So Justin Parker is the interim coach there now. Perhaps he could coach his way into a job. Again, I doubt that, especially with the names that have been thrown out, who are much more proven entities. But we'll have to see on that one. But Mississippi State playing some good ball since they fired Lamonis. A&M takes 2 out of 3 from LSU. Another good series win for the Aggies. That's just been an odd team all year long. Of course, they got swept the weekend prior at Texas and Austin, losing 3 games by 1 run each. So they were right there, just couldn't pull out even a single win. But I think they've won 4 out of their last 5 series, with the exception of the Texas series. So the Aggies are pretty hot right now, but at the same time got off to such a bad start. They're still well under 500 in SEC play at 10-14. So maybe a good close of the season will get them close to 500 in SEC play. They're going to make the postseason, barring a total collapse here, and that's probably somebody that nobody wants to see at the end of or nobody wants to see in their regional. But that's a very hot and cold team. Vandy is going on a pretty good run as of late. They took 2 of 3 from Alabama. Florida swept South Carolina. The Gamecocks are really struggling. And Oklahoma took 2 of 3 from Ole Miss. So as you can see here, with the exception of Missouri, South Carolina, and the Vols, all the home teams either won the series 2 out of 3 or swept. So again, it's hard to win on the road in the SEC in these weekend series. And so, looking ahead to next weekend, we've got some good matchups as usual. These are some of the highlights. You've got LSU. I think they're going to Fayetteville. I don't know. We got a conflicting graphic here, but LSU is squaring off against Arkansas. Vanderbilt is going to go to Knoxville. As you can see, Tennessee kind of dropped after, their so this one is in Baton Rouge. Sorry. So LSU is hosting Arkansas. Tennessee's hosting Vanderbilt. Tennessee falling back to 15th. That's probably the lowest they've been perhaps all season. So really could use a win there. We saw this past weekend, Tony Vitello got pretty worked up and ultimately tossed from a game. We'll touch on that later with our Muschamp Coach of the Week. A little tease there, but we're bringing that back thanks to Tony Vitello's outburst. And then we've got number 6 Georgia going to number 23 Alabama. Let's see. And so that should be a good series in Tuscaloosa. And then the Egg Bowl on the baseball diamond, Mississippi State goes to Starkville. So that one will be interesting too. I mean, Ole Miss, not Mississippi State going to Starkville, Ole Miss. But Ole Miss has been a good team all year. They've stayed in the rankings, had some tough series as of late on the road, as this one in Starkville will be. But very interested to see how that one goes, because I think Ole Miss is the better team, but Mississippi State is scrappy, and perhaps their coach getting fired has ignited something in them. Again, they're on a 4-game win streak, maybe even 5 if they played a midweeker so far. But so they've been winning ball games since they fired their coach, and so that'll be interesting to see if they can keep that up against in-state foe at home. So that's kind of where we stand on the baseball diamond. Again, we got 2 more weeks before everybody heads to Hoover, so should be an exciting finish to the season. As I mentioned before, Texas still holds a 2-game lead in the SEC standings. They're at 19-5. Arkansas is at 17-7. Georgia and LSU are both at 15-9. I would say, realistically, I think the race is between Texas and Arkansas, perhaps for the regular season title. So maybe Georgia and LSU, if they sweep the rest of the way, could get there, but that's a pretty big hill to climb with only 2 weekend series remaining. But should be a fun last couple of weeks, and then of course the SEC tournament in Hoover is always a great time as well. So let's see. The last thing we were going to touch on, as I brought up at the top of the show. So we had a nice article, and by the way, another shameless plug for our newsletter here, because Boss Man did a good job of covering this in the newsletter. But there's an AL.com article that basically was breaking down SEC football revenues, and per team in the SEC. So not surprisingly, Texas topped that, of course. So here's the graphic of just purely football revenue across the SEC. And Texas has a pretty commanding lead with their, I think they surpassed the 200 million mark in revenue, 4 million. When things are good in Texas, man, they just have money, right? It's a giant university, a giant state, the flagship, if you want to call it that, as an Aggie. I don't want to call it that, but a lot of people would say that. So you can see here, Texas up over 200 million, and the next closest was Tennessee at 149 million. So I don't really know exactly, what all goes into this. I would imagine, obviously, the fact that Texas made it into the Final Four of the college football playoff is helping bolster that. Of course, they made it further than anybody else in the conference did. So that probably helps, but still, that doesn't make up for that massive gap. So Texas leading the way by a pretty commanding lead. And then I would say you kind of have another tier in there going from Tennessee down to Florida, who all surpassed 100 million. Again, at Tennessee coming in 149 million. Georgia was at 133, Oklahoma 131. Auburn, I think, was at 118, or maybe that's A&M was at 118. But then you've got the schools kind of bringing up the rear under 100 million. So, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Mizzou, Kentucky, Mississippi State. And I think this is just an interesting graphic to show, because it shows even within the conference, right? We all think of, SEC schools have money. SEC schools have money. And they certainly do. But there's still levels to that, even within the conference. And as you can see right now, Texas has a hell of a lot more money than anybody else. Tennessee, Bama, Georgia, Oklahoma doing great. Auburn, A&M, LSU, Florida doing good, but, compared to some of the guys at the top, are lagging behind. And then schools like South Carolina, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky, Mississippi State are well behind. So I think this kind of just gives you a good idea in a lot of ways of like how hard it is to win at some of these places, So like South Carolina and Ole Miss had great seasons last year. Ole Miss has had great seasons the last few years. And when you look at their revenue, I mean, they're kind of getting blown out of the water by these bigger schools, even within their own league. So the job that Shane Beamer has done and Lane Kiffin has done and Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri to win the games he's done, and Mark Stoops in years past at Kentucky, is really impressive, because even within the own league, you are fighting an uphill battle in a lot of cases. From here, unsurprisingly, there's another graphic in SEC spending. Alabama and A&M actually led the way there. So Bama spent a ton this past season, and Texas A&M was close. I think, let me see what it says here. I think the Alabama, spending was a little bit high this past year. It's not something that they expect. I think it was a lot due to the coaching transition, is what I'm reading in this AL.com article. So that's sort of the reason Bama's not only leading the way, but leading the way by a wide margin. It is not something that's expected, necessarily to continue at that pace. But you can see here, I mean, even a school like A&M, for instance, who, if you go back to the revenue, was kind of middle of the pack at 118. Their spending was higher than most, but only at 90 million. So they're still turning a profit, a very, very hefty profit on just football alone, despite being middle of the pack in revenues and on the high end of spending. And then, of course, if you want to single out Texas, I mean, they spent 65 million there. kind of in the middle and brought in over 200. So that's an incredibly profitable entity that, and efficient operation that the Longhorns are running. I do think, it's important too, again, to some of these schools are actually not, turning much of a profit, if at all. Like Missouri, for instance, brought in 56 million in revenue and spent 52. Mississippi State brought in 43 million and spent 35. So some of these schools are kind of operating on the margins here, relative again to the other schools in the SEC. So the haves and have-nots in college football, will always be there, even within the league. And you can see here this graph, as I mentioned, around the surplus, right? So Texas, massive surplus. They've got more money than they know what to do with, which is probably why their roster this coming fall is set to be about a $40 million roster in their NIL budget, because they got a ton of money and, it's got to be spent somehow. But everybody did, break even or excuse me, do better than breaking even with Missouri, Georgia, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Ole Miss kind of operating on pretty slim margins. And then you've got the middle of the pack with Alabama, A&M, and South Carolina, and then LSU through Texas has turned a pretty hefty profit, including Auburn, who had a terrible year last year, but they brought in, or had well over 50 million in surplus revenue. So I guess the moral of the story here is kind of twofold. A, the SEC is doing pretty dang good. There is a ton of money right now flowing into these programs just in football. And at the same time, there is a large discrepancy from the top dogs in the SEC to the bottom. Despite, conference payouts and all that being equal, there are schools that are bringing in and have way higher, profit margins to work with than do some other ones here. So I thought that was just an interesting article. Again, the full article is on AL.com. There's a link in our newsletter from earlier today. It's written by Matt Stahl, if you want to go check that out and read through the full thing. But just an interesting, a little interesting tidbit, kind of behind the scenes, revenue stuff from this past season. And will be interesting to see, keep track of that in years moving forward. The house settlement and stuff, like, honestly, might increase some of these schools' surplus at the end of the day, because it's going to put a cap on what you can pay your players. So I think that'll be a good thing. But again, these schools are going to spend that money. So if you have a surplus of, in Texas's case, $138 million surplus, like, they're going to spend it on something, whether it's coaches or facilities or whatever. It's going to get spent. So we need to, as an SEC, conference here, I think we ought to get together and knock Texas down a peg, because that is truly an ungodly amount of profit margin that they're working on, especially when you consider the next best in the SEC was 73. So Texas more than doubled the next best, or excuse me, my math is bad. Not quite doubled, but basically doubled the next best team. So the last thing we have here to talk about before we get to Biscuit of the Week and our Muschamp Coach of the Week is I just quickly wanted to hit on the Todd Golden news, where he gets signed to a contract extension. So not a surprise here. Obviously, Florida just won a dang national title. So first time since whatever it was, 2007 under Billy Donovan, I think. But again, not surprising at all on that one. But it's a $40.5 million contract extension through 2031. So he's going to be around for a long time. We'll see, what that means long term. He's a great coach, and he did a great job at Florida this year. But I do think college basketball, especially with the portal, is just really hit or miss in a lot of cases. You saw perennial powers, Kansas, North Carolina were not good this year. UConn, back-to-back defending champs, was okay, got in as an 8 seed. So I think Florida with Golden there is in great hands, and they're going to be good and relevant. But I do think there will be much more ups and downs overall, not just at Florida, but, for all these teams moving forward, until there's perhaps contracts and these players are employees. But as long as we still have the free agency, I do think it's a very year-to-year proposition in college basketball, because you can completely transform your roster in one off season, for better or for worse, with the transfer portal. We actually got a question here. This is from our buddy Jake Thomas on SEC After Dark. Be sure to watch us tomorrow. He'll be on there. But he's asking about what Alabama baseball needs to finish the season and earn a host spot. So that's a good question. I mean, I think the SEC, well, I don't know. I guess it depends on how much, they take into account the SEC tournament. But in terms of just finishing the regular season, I would have to think that they're probably going to need to take 2 out of the 3 of their next series, because I think at the moment they are, let's see, what are they? They are, gosh, I should know this. We've got them, or not we, but they are ranked currently. I think it was like 23rd last I saw in the top 16 teams host. So if they can take 2 out of 3 from Georgia this weekend, which is at home, so it's very possible that they could do that. And Georgia's currently number 6, so that would be a huge series win for them. And then if they could take 2 out of 3 from Florida and then have a good showing in Hoover, I think they'd have a very good chance of hosting. So that's what I would look for. I don't know if that guarantees them a spot, but I think if you can go 6-2, 4-2 in the last couple of weekends here, and of course, win your midweek games, if they even have any. I don't know if they still do this late in the year, but I would look for them to win 2 out of 3, and then I think they'd have a darn good chance of hosting, which would be great, because Bama's got a good baseball program, but I don't know if they have hosted in recent years. So that would be super, super fun to see them host a regional. All right. Well, we're moving and shaking right now because it's a one-man operation with Boss Man's power going out. And so we'll close out the show here with some of our 2 favorite segments. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. If you're new here, we typically do a biscuit of the week and what we call Muschamp Coach of the Week to close our show. So I'll start with the biscuit of the week, and this was made by Boss Man, this graphic. But I will say, so again, to sort of reset here, if you're new or if you just started watching during the off season, because we haven't been keeping up with this too much, but we like to do a biscuit of the week. We are Biscuits in SEC. We love SEC football, but also food and sort of the Southern culture that comes along with SEC football. So we like to highlight biscuits. If you have something that you made or had at a restaurant, send us a DM, shoot us an email, and we'll be sure to feature it on the show. This week, we have from Garden and Gun, which is a great magazine. Boss Man and I are both subscribers. We're keeping print media alive, but we do subscribe to this. And these are cheese straw biscuits with country ham. And they've got the recipe in the most recent issue. I think the feature was done by, Catherine Cobbs. So pretty much looks like heaven in your mouth. A biscuit made and baked with like cheese mixed into it is phenomenal in and of itself. And then you add some country ham, extra salty, then I'm all in, because I love country ham, and throw it on a biscuit with an egg and some cheese baked into the biscuit. Count me in. I'll take 5, and I'll be happy. So that looks delicious. So be sure to check out Garden and Gun. I'm sure they've got a ton of stuff online where you can subscribe to the print magazine if you're old school. Lastly, we've got our Muschamp Coach of the Week. So again, this is something we like to do every week during the season, and just sort of highlight a coach that might have lost their cool or said something kind of funny. It's really just an homage to Will Muschamp, because we love that guy, and it's a real shame he couldn't get things going at Florida or South Carolina, because he's just a great personality. He's funny to have in SEC football because he's a complete lunatic. He's constantly screaming on the sidelines, screaming at refs, screaming at players, spits flying everywhere. He's punching whiteboards, pregame and during halftime. Just a great figure in the sport. And so, since he's not a head coach at the moment, or not really in, the public eye, we like to, pay tribute to him by nominating a coach each week who we think embodies that sort of reckless passion and enthusiasm that Will Muschamp was known for. And that this week, of course, was Tony Vitello. So I brought that up briefly earlier when talking about Tennessee baseball. He kind of had a blow up this past weekend, which is not uncommon for him. So here's the clip.
6-0. Nothing has really went your way. And I think Tony Vitello is just, he's going to let everybody have it, I believe. Yep.
Well, Tony Vitello making his rounds.
He's about to go take a shower.
Yep, he is feeling it, and there he goes. He's saving the best for last. Tony Vitello has been ejected.
Great call there too from the guys on the game. I love that end there. And Tony Vitello has been ejected. So, what I love about this, and this is far from the first time Tony Vitello, has been tossed from a game. He's extremely fiery, extremely passionate. And anytime you have a manager blow up like that in a baseball game, it's funny. I mean, unfortunately, he didn't do the grenade with the rosin bag. He didn't sweep the dirt over home plate or anything like that. But what I really loved about this outburst from Vitello was he basically went to each umpire and, insert whatever profanities you want to insert that he was saying. But he wanted to make sure that every single one of them knew is he wasn't just mad at home plate or the infield or the first base or the third base. He was pissed off at all of them, and he pointed at all of them, and he screamed at all of them. He gets tossed, and then his little, not even a throw, just the quick, grabs the chair and just tosses it over and folds it up as he's walking back into the dugout for a shower, as the play-by-play guy said there. And Jake, I agree. Baseball coaches getting tossed is some of the best. I mean, that if you want a good laugh, just look up on YouTube, best manager freakouts, because when they lose their mind, it's a sight to see. And we saw that this week from Tony Vitello. So he gets the wonderful and esteemed award of Muschamp Coach of the Week. I'll have his people contact our people to get him the actual award in the mail and make sure that he's aware of it. I'm sure he'll be excited for that. But maybe that's what Tennessee needed They've got, again, a couple of big series coming up to close the year. They've lost 4 out of 5 SEC series, and they lost this one against Auburn in Knoxville. So I understand why he's frustrated. I do think I didn't watch a ton of that series. I caught a couple innings, but I did hear, obviously, from Tennessee fans that the umpiring was pretty bad. I think that's a theme in all SEC sports, whether it's football, basketball, baseball. The referees, the umpires kind of leave a lot to be desired, especially for a league as prestigious as the SEC. But Vitello lost his cool, gets tossed, cusses out each umpire individually. So that is worth the Muschamp Coach of the Week for this week. I think that's all we've got. So sorry for a quicker show this week. Sorry for a one-man show with Boss Man losing his power. Literally right before the show, he clicked go live and then the countdown video, and then just boom, he was gone. And I get a text saying his power went out. So anyway, appreciate y'all tuning in. Thanks again to the Steer Agency for sponsoring us. Appreciate everybody who's tuned in live. Please consider signing up for our newsletter. Again, that goes out weekly during the off season. So next Wednesday, be on the lookout for that. We'll be back here next Wednesday, same time, Biscuits and SEC live at 7 p.m. Eastern. We will be not tuning in. I hope y'all will tune in tomorrow night to SEC After Dark with the whole crew, including Jake Thomas of Tide Talk Live, Stephen Willis, Corey Burton, Jeb Beecham, Mike Huseman, myself, Boss Man. So we've got a great crew, and we appreciate you all supporting, our work here, our work on the SEC After Dark channel. So without further ado, I will sign out, and we will see y'all tomorrow night on SEC After Dark and next week on Biscuits and SEC Live. Appreciate y'all.